Hi, I'm Jim Ward of the Middle Country Public Library, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode in our History Bites series. Today, as part of our 250th commemoration, we will discuss the Committee of Five that was appointed by Congress to draft a Declaration of Independence in 1776. After a year of open conflict between England and her 13 American colonies, Virginian Richard Henry Lee rose on the floor of Congress and proposed his Virginia Resolution on June 7, 1776, that stated that, quote, "These united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is, and ought to be, totally dissolved." The controversial resolution sparked a contentious debate. Delegate John Dickinson, who in his essay Letters from a Farmer in Pennsylvania had protested British actions in the colonies, argued against the call for independence, believing the time was not yet right for separation and that violence should not be used to resolve the conflict. Other delegates, like Edward Rutledge from South Carolina and James Wilson of Pennsylvania, opposed Lee's resolution on principle, because they had not been authorized to support it by their constituents. The vote on the Virginia Resolution, officially proposed by Richard Henry Lee on June 7th, had been delayed until July 1st, in deference to several delegations that were obliged to confer with their state legislatures before any binding vote on independence could be cast. If and when the Virginia Resolution passed, a document should be ready so that Congress could proceed without pause to publish the decision. Congress appointed a committee of five: John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Robert Livingston, Roger Sherman, and Thomas Jefferson, to draft a Declaration of Independence. It probably met soon thereafter, either that day or the next, perhaps with Jefferson as its head. In his autobiography, written in 1805, John Adams said that the committee had, quote, "several meetings in which were proposed the articles of which the Declaration was to consist, and minutes made of them." In other words, it outlined the document, dividing it into sections or articles, probably decided in at least general terms of what its various parts should say, and committed those conclusions to paper as minutes or instructions to the draftsman. Then the drafting committee, or Committee of Five as it came to be called, had to decide who would write the document. The committee in turn assigned the task of writing the document to 33-year-old Thomas Jefferson. As Adams told the story, quote, "The committee appointed Mr. Jefferson and me to draw them, the articles, up in form and clothe them in proper dress. The subcommittee met and considered the minutes, making such observations on them as then occurred. When Mr. Jefferson desired me to take them to my lodgings and make the draft, this I declined, and gave several reasons for declining. 1, that he was a Virginian, and I a Massachusettsian. 2, that he was a Southern man, and I a Northern one. 3, that I had been so obnoxious for my early and constant zeal in promoting the measure that any draft of mine would undergo a more severe scrutiny and criticism in Congress than one of his composition. Fourthly, and lastly, that would be reason enough if there were no other, I had a great opinion of the elegance of his pen, and none at all of mine." He accordingly took the minutes, and in a day or two produced to me his draft. The political advantages in having the Declaration written by a Virginian and a Southerner, rather than a New Englander, and above all one from Massachusetts, were powerful. It would demonstrate that support for independence went far beyond the so-called radical children of the Puritans, who were sometimes accused of pulling the country in their preferred democratical or anti-monarchical direction. Adams, moreover, had in fact been an outspoken defender of independence in congressional debates, perhaps to the point of obnoxiousness, while Jefferson, a notoriously weak speaker, remained silent. John Dickinson's opposition to independence disqualified him from this particular assignment, and Benjamin Franklin was suffering from a fit of gout so severe that he stopped attending Congress about a week before the drafting committee was appointed. Franklin's illness did more than disqualify him as a possible draftsman of the Declaration. It meant that only 4 people attended most and perhaps all of the meetings of the Committee of Five, a detail neither Adams nor Jefferson seems to have remembered. It appears that Adams's memory of the events surrounding who was chosen to write the Declaration might have been incorrect. Jefferson claimed he had, quote, written notes taken by himself at the moment and on the spot. The Committee of Five met, he said, and, quote, unanimously pressed on myself alone to make the draft. I consented, I drew it, but before I reported it to the committee, I communicated it separately to Dr. Franklin and Mr. Adams, requesting their corrections because they were the two members of whose judgments and amendments I wished most to have the benefit before presenting it to the committee. Jefferson was the author of several important works on natural rights and Republican government, including the 1774 pamphlet, Summary View of the Rights of British North America, in which he wrote that the rights of the people were, quote, derived from the laws of nature and not as the gift of their chief magistrate. In July 1775, Jefferson had also written the declarations of the causes and necessity of taking up arms. Jefferson sat in his boarding house and composed a draft of the Declaration of Independence. He wrote the Declaration with few books and pamphlets beside him, except for a copy of George Mason's Virginia Declaration of Rights and the draft Virginia Constitution. Jefferson completed his draft during the third week of June and submitted it to Adams and the committee, which made several edits. Adams later remembered, perhaps exaggerating, that it only took him a day or two. It was not, in fact, an original rough draft, as Jefferson referred to it, but a copy Jefferson made from earlier compositional fragments to show members of the drafting committee. He then used that copy to record all subsequent revisions in the Declaration of Independence, including those Congress made in early July. The manuscript is therefore heavily interlined, incorporating several generations or layers of revisions. Some of the editorial changes seemed to be in Adams's or Franklin's handwriting, although most were made by Jefferson. It shows the text at an early stage in its development, but he showed that draft to Adams and Franklin, two of the most prominent members in Congress whose judgment he respected. They suggested only one change. Instead of, "We hold these truths to be sacred and undeniable," they made the truths self-evident. An alteration that Jefferson apparently accepted as an improvement. Then the committee placed the document before the full Congress on June 28th. A debate then ensued on July 1st and July 2nd on the Virginia Resolution for Independence, which passed on July 2nd. On July 4th, the Congress approved the revised version of the Declaration of Independence, and it was sent to the printer for publication. John Adams thought July 2nd, not July 4th, would be marked as a national holiday for generations to come. Quote, "Independence Day will be the most memorable epocha in the history of America. I am apt to believe that it will be celebrated by succeeding generations as the great anniversary festival. It ought to be solemnized with pomp and parade, with shoes, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other, from this time forward, forevermore." Adams predicted the deep reverence that Americans would give to American independence, but was off by 2 days. The day that Americans celebrate their independence came to be July 4th, the day that the Continental Congress approved the Declaration of Independence. Thank you for joining us for today's episode. If you enjoyed it, click like, and if you watched on YouTube, hit subscribe. Thanks so much, and we'll see you all next time.